Listen to me. Life is gonna throw problems at you every single day. I don't care who you are, where you live, or what you do. Problems are part of the game. But here's the deal. Some of you get stuck staring at the problem so long you forget there's even a solution. You're so busy replaying what went wrong, you never start working on what can go right. You gotta shift your mindset. Stop feeding your fear. Stop feeding your faith. The problem is the alarm clock. The solution is you getting up and taking action. The problem is the mountain. The solution is you climbing it step by step. People who win, they don't complain about the storm. They build a shelter. They plant seed. They use the rain to grow. You gotta learn to take control. Don't give your problems the power to define your future. Winners don't spend 90% of their time describing the problem and only 10% find an answer. Flip that. Put 90% of your energy into the solution. Put your focus where it will make an impact. If you want change, you gotta stop being problem-minded and start being solution-minded. Problems will always be there, but so will opportunities. The question is, where are you going to put your attention? I'm telling you, the moment you focus on solutions, your energy changes, your creativity comes alive, and your results go to a whole new level. When you face a problem, the first thing you have to understand is that it's not the problem that destroys you, it's how you see it. The way you interpret the situation, the perspective you take, that's what determines whether you get stronger or weaker. Too many of us, the moment something goes wrong, we see it as the end. We see it as proof that we're not good enough, that we're unlucky, that life is against us. But I need you to hear me. That's a choice. Your perspective is a choice. Two people can go through the exact same situation. One comes out bitter, comes out better. What's the difference? It's not the size of the problem, it's the size of the mindset. I remember times in my life when the circumstances looked impossible. I was homeless at one point. I was a high school dropout. Every sign around me pointed to failure. If I looked at it the wrong way, if I decided, this is my life now, this, how it will always be, I would have been done before I even started. But I made a decision. I wasn't going to let my current situation define my future. I wasn't going to look at my struggle as a prison. I was going to see it as a classroom. My pain was my professor. My mistakes were my textbooks. And every single day I learned. That's what I mean by shifting your perspective. Problems can either be walls that trap you or doors that teach you. You decide which one they are. The truth is, life will never give you a season without challenges. If you're waiting for a moment when everything is smooth, you'll be waiting your whole life. But if you can train your mind to see the problem as part of the process, as part of the growth, suddenly it stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like preparation. When you shift your perspective, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what can I learn from this? That one change in the question changes everything about the answer. Because of why me keeps you stuck. It keeps you focused on the negative. It keeps you in a victim state. But what can I learn? Opens up possibilities. It forces your brain to search for solutions. It gets you out of your feelings and into your future. Some of you right now are looking at your financial struggles and thinking, I'm broke, this is the end. There's somebody else in your same shoes is thinking, okay, this is my moment to get creative. This is my moment to start a side hustle, to learn a new skill, to make a change. The situation is the same, but the perspective is completely different. One person will sink and one person will swim. Not because the water is different, but because their focus is. You gotta understand that the way you see a problem, we either magnify it or minimize it. If you keep talking about it like it's a giant monster, if you keep replaying in your mind as this unbeatable enemy, then you're giving it power it doesn't even have. But if you start speaking about it as something temporary, something you can work through, something you can outlast, then you've already taken away half of its strength. That's why you hear me say all the time, don't make a permanent decision based on a temporary situation. What you see right now is not all there is. And let's be honest, most of the problems you faced in your life before you survived, you're still here. That means you got a track record of making it through. But because you didn't consciously shift your perspective, you may have forgotten your own strength. You've been through storms before. You've been in the dark before. You've taken hits before. And every single time, you made it out. So why would this time be any different? Here's the truth. Life is not against you. Life is just testing you. Life is asking you, do you really want this? Do you really believe in your dream? Are you willing to go through the fire to get it? And the only way to answer that is by the way you respond when things get hard. If you fold, if you quit, if you start complaining, you've answered the question. But if you keep going, if you see the problem as an opportunity to prove yourself, then you've already shifted your perspective into that of a champion. One of the most powerful things you can do is reframe the meaning of what's happening. You can't always control the event, but you can control the meaning you give it. A flat tire on the way to a big meeting. You can see it as a disaster that ruined your day. Or you can see it as a test of your patience, a reminder to leave earlier next time, even a blessing that might have saved you from an accident down the road. The event is the same, but the meaning changes your mood, your energy, and your action. When you start training yourself to look at problems differently, you also start building resilience. Resilience is not about avoiding problems, it's about bouncing back from them faster. And the faster you can reframe a situation from this is horrible to this is helpful, the less time you waste in frustration and the more time you spend in action. Think about it like this. Life is like a camera. If you keep the lens dirty, every picture you take will be blurry and dark. But if you clean the lens, if you shift your perspective, suddenly the picture becomes clear. The problem hasn't changed, but your ability to see the details, to spot the opportunities, to focus on what matters has improved. That's the power of perspective. I need you to stop making your problems bigger than they are and start making your vision bigger than your problems. When you have a strong enough vision for where you're going, the obstacles along the way start to look smaller. If you're driving across the country and you hit a traffic jam, you don't turn around and go home. You don't say, I guess we're never getting there. No, you find another route, you wait it out, you do whatever it takes because your destination matters more than the delay. That's the mindset you need every single day. And understand this, your perspective is contagious. The way you look at problems doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone around you. If you're a leader, your team is watching how you respond. If you're a parent, your kids are learning from the way you handle stress. If you're a friend, your circle is being influenced by your energy. When you choose a perspective of possibility instead of panic, you give others permission to do the same. I've seen people with very little accomplish incredible things simply because they refuse to see their lack as a limit. They saw it as a challenge to be creative, a reason to grind harder. I've also seen people with plenty of resources fail because they saw every small inconvenience as a catastrophe. It's not the resources, it's the resourcefulness. And resourcefulness starts with perspective. So today I'm challenging you. The next time a problem comes your way, catch yourself. Catch the first thought that comes to your mind. If it's negative, if it's hopeless, stop and flip it. Ask yourself, what's another way to look at this? What's this opportunity here? How could this actually work in my favor? I promise you, if you start doing this consistently, you'll start to see solutions you never noticed before. You'll start moving faster, feeling stronger, and handling life with a whole new level of confidence. Because at the end of the day, life isn't about avoiding problems. It's about mastering your perspective so you can turn those problems into progress. And when you learn to do that, there's nothing, and I mean nothing, that can stop you. When you face a problem, the natural human tendency is to keep replaying it over and over again in your mind. You start talking about it to everyone who will listen. You go to sleep thinking about it. You wake up thinking about it. You sit at work thinking about it. You sit at work thinking about it. And what you're doing without realizing it is feeding. You're giving the problem energy. You're making it bigger and heavier than it needs to be. You're putting it under a magnifying glass until it fills your entire field of vision. That's why you feel overwhelmed. Not because the problem is impossible to solve, but because you've made it the only thing you can see. I've met people who will spend weeks talking about what's wrong, but they haven't taken a single step toward fixing it. They've memorized every detail of the issue. They can tell you every reason why it's hard, but they can't give you one concrete action they've taken to change it. And I'm telling you, that mindset will keep you stuck forever. The more you rehearse the problem, the more it becomes your story. The more you identify with it, the more it becomes part of who you are instead of something you're going through. There's a difference between understanding a problem and living in it. Yes, you need to know what you're dealing with. Yes, you need clarity about what's broken. But there's a fine line between awareness and obsession. Awareness is looking at the problem long enough to figure out what you need to do. Obsession is staring at it so long that you forget you have the power to move on. One keeps you informed, the other keeps you in prison. You've got to make a decision. Am I going to be a problem reporter or a problem solver? Problem reporters just describe the situation over and over again. They gather sympathy, they collect opinions, they spread the story. Problem solvers acknowledge the situation once, then immediately move into action. They're not looking for pity, they're looking for progress. And progress doesn't happen while you're stuck in mental loops. When you focus too much on the problem, you drain your own energy. You start telling yourself the story of I can't. You start believing that the obstacle is bigger than you. But here's the truth. If you put that same amount of mental energy into finding solutions, you already be halfway there. The human brain is a problem-solving machine when you give it a chance. The problem is, most people keep it on a negative loop. So all it produces is more reasons to be stuck. Think about a time when you had a challenge that seemed huge, and then you finally took action. Maybe you made a phone call, maybe you researched an option, maybe you asked for help. As soon as you did, the weight started to lift. Why? Because action interrupts the cycle of overthinking. Action gives your brain a new focus. The moment you stop feeding the problem and start feeding the solution, you take back control. Let's be real, some of you are stuck not because your problem is impossible, but because you've gotten comfortable talking about it. You've made it part of your identity. I'm broke, I'm unlucky, stuck in this job. You say it so often it feels like a fact instead of a temporary situation. You wear it like a badge. And if you're not careful, you'll start protecting that identity instead of challenging it. Because fixing the problem means you can't lean on it as an excuse anymore. And some people aren't ready to give up their excuses. I'm telling you right now, you got to break that habit. Start catching yourself when you're about to repeat the same complaint for the 10th time. Ask yourself, is this conversation helping me get closer to a solution, or is it just keeping me stuck? If it's not moving you forward, stop mid-sentence if you have to. Train yourself to shift from here's what's wrong to here's what I'm going to do about it. I learned this in my own life. Back when I was struggling, I would spend hours telling my friends about how bad things were. I talk about my situation like it was a storm I couldn't escape. And one day, someone close to me said, "You've told me the same thing 3 times this week. What are you doing about it?" That hit me. I realized I've been rehearsing my problems so much that I memorized them, but I hadn't taken a single real step toward fixing them. From that day, I decided that if I was going to open my mouth about a problem, it had to be followed by action steps. So, the truth is, talking about the problem can feel good in the moment. It can give you a sense of relief because you're getting it off your chest. But too much of that becomes toxic. It becomes a cycle where you vent, you feel a little better, you do nothing, the problem stays, and then you vent again. It's like scratching a mosquito bite. It gives temporary relief, but it just makes it worse. When you stop overthinking the problem and start thinking about solutions, something changes in you. You start feeling powerful again. You start realizing that you have options. You start recognizing that you can make small moves that create big results over time. Maybe you can't fix everything overnight, but you can fix something today. And that's how momentum is built, one small win at a time. I've seen this with athletes, entrepreneurs, students. It's the same everywhere. The ones who win aren't the ones who never face problems. They're the ones who face problems and immediately start brainstorming how to win anyway. They don't let the problem become the main character in their story. They make themselves the main character. The problem is just a plot twist. And every great story needs a plot twist to make the victory sweeter. You also have to understand that the longer you stay focused on the problem, the more it trains your brain to look for more problems. Your mind becomes wired to see what's wrong instead of what's possible. That's why some people always seem to find something to complain about no matter how good things are. It's not because life is treating them worse. It's because they've trained their mind to look for problems like a metal detector. And when you look for problems, you find them. But if you train your mind to look for solutions, you'll start finding them everywhere, even in places you never expected. This is why some people see a closed door and stop, while others see a closed door and start looking for a window, a back entrance, or even a way to build their own door. The door didn't change. It's the mindset that made the difference. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you catch yourself thinking about a problem for the third or fourth time in a row, stop and write down 3 possible solutions. They don't even have to be perfect solutions, just possibilities. The act of shifting your focus trains your brain to start moving forward instead of staying stuck. And once you got those ideas, pick one and take immediate action on it, no matter how small. Because the truth is, nothing changes until you move. You can pray about it, journal about it, talk about it, but until you do something, you're just feeding the problem. And the longer you feed it, the bigger it gets. But the moment you start feeding the solution, the problem starts losing weight, losing power, losing control over your life. You gotta want progress more than you want pity. You gotta want results more than you want reassurance. You gotta decide that you're done being the person who just talks about the problem and ready to become the person who solves it. When you do that, your whole life will start to shift. Because here's the bottom line. Your mind can only hold one main focus at a time. If you fill it with the problem will run your life. If you fill it with solutions, the solutions will run your life. And I promise you, the life that comes from focusing on solutions is a whole lot bigger, better, and more rewarding than the life that comes from focusing on problems. If you really want to change your life, you got to flip the energy ratio. Most people spend 90% of their time, their thoughts, their conversations, and their energy on the problem, and maybe 10%, if that, on the solution. That's backwards. That's like a doctor spending all day telling you what's wrong with your health and only giving you 2 minutes on how to get better. You wouldn't accept that from a doctor, but that's how you treat your own life. You talk about the problem over breakfast. You stress over it during lunch. You complain about it after work. And then you scroll social media looking for proof that other people have it better than you. And when it comes time to actually take steps toward fixing it, you're too mentally exhausted to do anything. You got to reverse it. You've got to train yourself to put 90% of your energy into finding, creating, and acting on solutions, and only 10% on understanding and acknowledging the problem. Why only 10%? Because that's all you need to identify what's going on. You don't have to do a deep dive on every painful detail. You just need enough information to figure out what direction to move in. After that, it's all about the action. Here's the reality. When you put most of your energy on a problem, you magnify it. You give it room to grow. You make it feel bigger than it really is. But when you put most of your energy on the solution, you shrink the problem. It doesn't mean it disappears overnight, but it starts to lose its grip on your emotions. And once your emotions are back in your control, you start making better decisions. I've seen this in my own life and in the lives of people I've coached. The ones who keep their focus on the problem end up drained, bitter, and hopeless. They say things like, it's just one thing after another, or I can't catch a break. And because they believe it, they keep finding more evidence to prove it. The ones who flip the ratio and focus on solution, they're the ones who turn setbacks into setup. They see the same obstacles as everyone else, but their energy is going toward what they can do about it, not what's wrong. Imagine you're driving and your car breaks down. If you put 90% of your energy into the problem, you'll spend most of your time sitting in the car, cursing the situation, thinking about how late you're going to be, calling people to complain, maybe even blaming yourself for not getting the car checked earlier. But if you put 90% into the solution, you'll spend most of your time figuring out how to get it towed, finding another way to get where you need to go, calling the right people, and making sure you're back on the road as soon as possible. The situation is the same. The difference is where you put your energy. Some of you right now are running your entire lives on the wrong ratio. You're giving your power, your creativity, and your emotional strength to things you can change, to pouring them into the things you can. And the problem with that is simple. What you focus on grows. If you focus on negativity, you'll see more negativity. If you focus on solutions, you'll see more opportunities. And I get it. Sometimes the problem feels huge. Sometimes it feels like there's no obvious answer. And the truth is, maybe the perfect answer isn't there yet. But that's why you can't afford to spend 90% of your time in the dark. You gotta start lighting candles. You gotta brainstorm ideas, even if some of them don't work. You gotta try things, take risks, make moves, because every step you take toward a solution teaches you something that brings you closer to the real fix. You have to think like an engineer. When an engineer faces a problem, they don't sit in a meeting for hours crying about why it happened. They identify the issue, and then the rest of the time is spent designing, testing, and improving solutions. They know that the longer they sit with a problem, the less time they have to fix it. You've got to start treating your life with that same urgency. The other reason you need to flip the ratio is because solutions take effort, real effort. It's not enough to think about them for a few minutes a day. You have to work them, refine them, and keep pushing until they stick. That's not gonna happen if you're spending most of your day stuck in an what's wrong mindset. If you wanna build momentum, you gotta give the solution more time than the problem. Think about professional athletes. When they lose a game, they might review the film for a short period of time to see what went wrong. That's the 10%. But then the rest of the week, they're training, adjusting strategies, running plays, and preparing for the next game. That's the 90%. That's the 90%. They don't sit around talking about the loss all week. Why? Because they know the next game is coming whether they're ready or not. Life works the same way. The next opportunity is coming whether you're prepared or not. The question is, will you be ready or will you still be sitting around replaying the loss? I can tell you from experience, when you shift into this 90-10 mindset, your life starts moving faster. You stop wasting energy on things you can't control. You start spending your emotional and mental energy on progress. And the more progress you make, the more motivated you feel. It's a cycle, but this time it's a positive one. Some people say, but hey, what if I don't know the solution yet? Then make finding it your main focus. Research, learn, ask questions, experiment. Don't use I don't know as a reason to freeze. Use it as a reason to move harder, because solutions rarely come to people who are just sitting still. They come to people who are in motion, people who are willing to fail forward until they find what works. And let's be clear. Focusing on solutions doesn't mean ignoring reality. It doesn't mean pretending the problem doesn't exist. That 10% is there for a reason. You need to understand the challenge so you know what you're up against. But once you got the facts, stop giving them your whole day. Acknowledge them, then move. Because the more you feed the facts of the problem, the more they will feed your fear. The people who succeed in life aren't the ones who have the fewest problems. They're the ones who respond the fastest. They get that the clock is ticking. They know that every hour they spend obsessing over the problem is an hour they could have spent building the way out. And that's why they put almost all their energy into action. So I'm challenging you to take an honest inventory of your time and energy. For the last week, where has most of your focus been? Be real with yourself. If you've been living in that 90% problem zone, decide today to flip it. Even if you can't go all the way to 90-10 right away, start by shifting the balance. Spend less time on what's wrong and more on what you can do. And keep adjusting until you've built the habit of living in solution mode. Because here's the truth. When you live in that 90% solution space, you stop feeling like a victim and start feeling like a creator. You realize that no matter what comes your way, you can handle it. You might not have all the answers yet, but you know how to find them. And once you get there, problems stop being roadblocks and start being detours. Different routes that still lead to your destination. You can't control every problem that shows up in your life, but you can control how much of yourself you give to it. Give it just enough to understand it, then give the rest of yourself to building the answer. That's how you win. That's how you turn challenges into triumphs. That's how you take your life to the next level. The moment something goes wrong in your life, you have a choice. You can freeze, overthink, and let fear take over, or you can take action. And I'm not talking about perfect action. I'm not talking about knowing exactly what to do. I'm talking about movement, any movement that pushes you toward a solution. Too many people lose the battle not because the problem is too big, but because they waste so much time doing nothing. They get stuck in analysis, in worrying, in telling themselves they'll move when they feel ready. But let me tell you the truth. You're never going to feel completely ready. Readiness doesn't come before action. Readiness is built during action. When you freeze, you give the problem time to grow. You give it room to spread in your mind until it feels unstoppable. You let the fear attach itself to you like a weight. And the longer you sit still, the heavier that weight becomes. But the moment you take a step, any step, you start breaking that hold. You start reminding yourself that you're not powerless. Even if the step is small, it changes everything because it shifts your energy from passive to active. I've been in situations where I didn't have the full plan. I didn't know exactly what the outcome would be, but I refused to sit and let the problem control me. I started making phone calls, doing research, reaching out to people who could help. I took the next step that was in front of me, even if I didn't know what step 2 or step 3 was yet. And do you know what happened? As I moved, the next steps became clear. See, that's the thing. Clarity doesn't come from sitting still. It comes from movement. Some of you are waiting for the perfect answer to fall in your lap before you do anything. And that's why you're still in the same place. You've been waiting for the conditions to be right, but the conditions get right when you start moving. The road doesn't light up all the way. It lights up one section at a time as you take steps forward. And every time you move, you get more light, more options, more momentum. It's just like pushing a car that's broken down. If it's in park and you're standing there looking at it, it's not going anywhere. But the moment you put your hands on it and start pushing, even if it moves just an inch, you've broken the resistance. That inch turns into 2 inches. And then a foot, and before you know it, you're rolling. Life is the same way. You've got to push to get the momentum. You can't think your way into movement. You've got to move your way into solution. And I understand, sometimes fear feels paralyzing. Sometimes you don't know if the step you're taking is the right one. But here's the truth. It's better to take a wrong step and learn from it than to take no step at all and learn nothing. You can correct the wrong step. You can adjust your course as you go. But you can't adjust something that's not moving. You can't steer a parked car. One of the most dangerous lies you can believe is that waiting will make the problem go away. It won't. In fact, in most cases, waiting makes it worse. Small issues become big ones when left alone. A little tension in a relationship becomes a full-blown fallout. A small crack in your finances becomes a mountain of debt. A minor health symptom becomes a major diagnosis. Action is the cure for the disease of procrastination. You have to make a habit of responding quickly. I'm not saying be reckless, but stop giving fear and doubt room to talk you out of your own breakthrough. The faster you respond, the less time you give your mind to build walls around the problem. Speed is not just about solving the problem. It's about protecting your mindset. Every day you sit still, you train yourself to believe that you're stuck. Every day you take action, you train yourself to believe that you can change things. And listen, action is contagious. When you start moving, the people around you see it, and it gives them permission to start moving too. Your energy can inspire an entire team, a whole family, a community. But if you sit frozen, you send a different message. You tell people it's okay to wait until life gets easier. And life isn't going to get easier. You get stronger when you act, and that strength makes life feel easier. Sometimes the reason people don't take action is because they're afraid of failing. But you got to understand that failure is part of the process. You're going to get some things wrong. You're going to take steps that don't lead exactly where you hoped. But even those so-called failures are moving you forward because they're teaching you what doesn't work. They're helping you refine your approach. The only true failure is refusing to move. I've met people who've been thinking about starting for 5 years. Thinking about starting a business, thinking about going back to school, thinking about repairing a broken relationship. And after all those years of thinking, they're in the exact same place or worse. Why? Because thinking without action is just a longer way of saying I'm standing still. Action beats intention every time. The other side of this is that when you act, you feel a sense of ownership over your situation. When you freeze, you feel like life is just happening to you. You feel like a victim of circumstance. But the moment you act, you reclaim your role as the driver. You might still hit bumps, but at least you're holding the wheel. You're deciding the direction. And that shift from powerless to powerful changes everything about how you handle challenges. Let me make it real simple. When a problem shows up, acknowledge it and immediately do something. Make a call, write down a plan, take a step, send an email, have a conversation, anything that moves the needle forward. Don't give the problem the satisfaction of watching you sit there in defeat. Show it that you're a fighter, that you won't go down easy, that you're coming for the solution. And here's the thing. Once you start taking action consistently, it becomes who you are. You stop being the person who freezes, and you start being the person who responds. You build a reputation with yourself that you're reliable under pressure. And that reputation builds confidence, so that the next time a problem comes, you don't hesitate. You just move. If you think about it, some of the best breakthroughs in history came from people who didn't wait. They acted in imperfect conditions. They didn't have all the answers. They just refused to let time pass without trying something. And because they acted, doors opened that would have stayed shut if they had just sat there thinking about it. So, I'm telling you, stop letting hesitation rob you of your momentum. Stop waiting for the perfect plan. The perfect plan is an illusion. What you need is the perfect habit of acting in the face of uncertainty. Because life is unpredictable, but action is always available to you. When you make movement your default response to problems, you stop being at the mercy of circumstances. You become a problem solver by nature, not just by choice. And when that happens, nothing can hold you back for long. Not fear, not doubt, not setbacks. Because you'll always be moving, and moving is life. Most people are so locked into the problem that they can't see anything beyond it. They stare at it, replay it, talk about it until it becomes the only thing they can think about. And here's the danger. What you focus on expands. If you spend all your time staring at the problem, your mind starts building walls around it. You start to believe that it's bigger than it really is. You start to think there's no way around it, no path forward, no hope. But the truth is, the problem is rarely as big as it feels. It just looks huge because you've made it the center of your attention. This is why you've got to train your mind to see possibilities. Your brain is wired to notice whatever you tell it is important. If you tell it the problem is important, it will look for more problems. If you tell it solutions are important, it will start looking for ways forward. The issue is, most people have been training their minds to focus on problems for years without even realizing it. They built a habit of looking for what's wrong instead of what's possible. And the only way to break that habit is to intentionally shift your focus. I'm not saying ignore the problem completely. You need to know what you're dealing with. But once you've identified it, your job is to stop staring at it and start scanning the horizon for solutions. Think about a driver on a winding road. If they keep staring at the pothole instead of looking ahead, they're going to hit it. It's not because they wanted to, but because your body follows your eyes. The same thing happens in life. Keep your eyes locked on the problem, and you'll crash right into it. Start looking toward the possibility, and you'll naturally steer toward them. One of the best ways to open yourself to possibilities is to start asking better questions. Instead of asking, oh, why is this happening to me? Ask, how can I use this? Instead of asking, what's the worst that could happen? What's the best possible outcome I can create here? Questions are powerful because they direct your focus. Bad questions keep you stuck. Great questions pull your mind into the space where solutions live. When you train yourself to see possibilities, something amazing happens. Your energy shifts. You stop feeling hopeless and start feeling curious. Curiosity is powerful because it moves you from a state of fear to a state of exploration. When you're curious, you're not just reacting, you're investigating, you're searching, you're open. And when you're open, you start seeing opportunities that were invisible before. The truth is, opportunities are all around you, even in the middle of your biggest challenges. But you can't see them when your mental lens is zoomed all the way in on what's wrong. You have to zoom out. You have to take a step back and see the bigger picture. Maybe the setback is forcing you to learn a skill you would have never picked up otherwise. Maybe it's pushing you into a new environment where you'll meet the right people. Maybe it's showing you a weak spot you didn't know existed so you can fix it before it causes bigger damage later. But you'll only notice these possibilities if you're looking for them. I've seen people go through some of the toughest situations. Losing a job, going through a breakup, facing a health crisis, and still come out better on the other side. Not because the problem was easy, but because they kept their eyes open for the lessons, the openings, the chances to grow. And I've seen others face the same kind of situations and spiral downward because they could only see the pain, not the potential. The difference wasn't the situation, it was the focus. You have to understand your brain is like a search engine. Whatever you type in, it will go find. If you type in the reasons my life is terrible, it will give you a list of reasons. If you type in the ways I can win today, it will go search for ways. You are in control of the search terms. And every time you choose to focus on possibilities instead of problems, you're changing the algorithm in your own mind. Sometimes seeing possibilities means you have to step outside your own head and get perspective. Talk to people who've been through what you're facing. Read about others who've turned similar challenges into victories. Surround yourself with people who are solution-oriented. Because if you spend all your time with people who only complain and dwell on the problem, you'll start to think that's normal. But when you're around people who look for the opportunity in every situation, you start training your eyes to do the same. And don't underestimate the small possibilities. Some people overlook them, e.g., for one big, perfect solution. But the truth is, big breakthroughs are often made up of small possibilities stacked together. A small conversation leads to a new connection. A small idea sparks a bigger one. A small change in your routine creates a new habit that changes your whole life. If you train yourself to see and act on the small openings, they'll lead you to the bigger doors. Another thing you got to remember is that possibilities often come disguised as problems. Sometimes what looks like a wall is actually a doorway. You just haven't found the handle yet. I've been in situations where I thought something was blocking me, only to realize it was redirecting me to a better path. But I never would have realized it if I stayed locked in on the frustration. I had to shift my view and start asking, what if this is happening for me, not to me? That question alone has opened up more possibilities than I can count. This mindset isn't just about optimism. It's about power. When you focus on possibility, you're taking your power back from the problem. You're saying, I get to decide where my energy goes. And that's critical, because the problem will always try to pull your energy into a spiral of doubt and frustration. But you have the ability to redirect it into a spiral of solutions and creativity. Here's the reality. Life will throw you challenges over and over again. You can't control that. What you can control is how quickly you shift from staring at the obstacle to spotting the openings around it. The faster you make that shift, the faster you'll move forward. When you live in this mindset long enough, something amazing happens. You start to believe that there's always a way. You stop panicking when problems come because you've trained your mind to immediately scan for solutions. You develop a quiet confidence that no matter what shows up, you'll find a path. And that belief alone will make you more creative, more resourceful, and more resilient than you've ever been. So the next time a problem shows up, catch yourself before you spiral. Ask yourself, where are the openings? What's the opportunity here? What's the next step I can take toward a better outcome? And then stay there. Keep scanning, keep searching. Keep your eyes locked on the possibilities until they start revealing themselves. Because they will, but only if you're looking. When you learn to do this, you'll realize that even the biggest problems are just temporary detours. The road might twist, the route might change, but there's always another way forward. And the people who succeed in life aren't the ones who avoid problems. They're the ones who train their minds to see possibilities no matter what's in front of them. That's the skill. That's the difference. And that's how you turn any problem into progress. When you're faced with a problem, the worst thing you can do is jump straight into trying to solve it without truly understanding it. Too many people hear about an issue, make a quick judgment, and then start throwing out random fixes like darts in the dark, hoping something will. But here's the truth. If you don't understand the problem deeply, you can't create an effective solution. You'll either waste your time on the wrong approach or create new problems you didn't see coming. Understanding the problem isn't just step one. It's the foundation for everything that comes after. Most people skip this step because it feels slower. They're in a rush to do something so they can feel like they're making progress. But moving fast in the wrong direction is worse than standing still. You can spend weeks, months, even years working hard on the wrong thing if you don't take the time to figure out exactly what's going on. That's why the first and most important move is to stop, step back, and observe. Understanding the problem means asking better questions, not just what's wrong. Why is this happening? Or what's the root cause? Who or what is affected? Has this happened before? It's about peeling back the layers, because most problems aren't just one thing, they're made up of smaller interconnected issues. If you only address the surface level symptom, the problem will keep coming back, just in different forms. Let's say your business is losing customers. The surface level problem might look like we need more advertising. If you dig deeper, you might find that customers are leaving because of poor customer service, or a lack of follow-up, or because your product no longer meets their needs. If you just throw more money into advertising without fixing those deeper issues, you'll bring in new customers only to lose them again. That's why understanding a problem in detail is so important. It ensures that when you act, you're addressing the heart of the issue, not just the noise around it. Part of understanding the problem is listening, really listening to the people involved. That means going beyond assumptions and getting the perspective of those who are experiencing it directly. If you're the leader of a team, that means talking to your people, asking open-ended questions, and making space for honest answers. If the problem is personal, it might mean reflecting on your own habits, patterns, and past decisions to see what's truly feeding the situation. Sometimes the hardest part about understanding a problem is accepting your role in it. That's why many people avoid looking too closely. They don't want to see how their own choices or attitudes contributed to the mess. If you're serious about finding a solution, you have to be willing to face that truth. Because when you own your part, you also own the power to change it. Another key to understanding a problem is separating facts from opinions. In stressful situations, people often confuse the two. Someone might say, oh, this project is impossible, but that's an opinion, not a fact. The fact might be, oh, we don't currently have enough resources to finish this project on time. The first statement leads to hopelessness. The second leads to action. You strip away the emotional exaggerations and focus on objective truths. The problem becomes clearer and far less intimidating. You also have to recognize that every problem exists in a larger context. A challenge you're facing today might be part of a pattern that's been building for years. A personal setback might be linked to habits you developed long before you noticed the issue. Looking at the broader context helps you see connections you would otherwise miss. And those connections often point to where the solution lies. One powerful method is to break the problem down into smaller, more manageable parts. Big problems can feel overwhelming because they're so tangled and complex. But when you dissect them into individual components, you can examine each one more clearly. You might discover that one part of the problem is actually easy to solve, and fixing it will make the rest of the issue much smaller. This approach doesn't just give you clarity, it also builds momentum, because each small win moves you closer to the full solution. Another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the problem you see isn't a real problem at all. It's just a symptom of something deeper. Think of it like a leaky ceiling. You can patch up the spot where the water is dripping, but if you don't find and fix the hole in the roof, the leak will come back. In life, the leaks, a failed project, a broken relationship, or a sudden crisis. But the hole in the roof could be miscommunication, neglect, poor planning, or an unhealthy mindset. If you can identify that root cause, you'll not only solve the problem in front of you, you'll prevent it from happening again. Taking the time to truly understand the problem also helps you communicate it better to others. If you're working with a team, clarity is crucial. You can't expect people to work toward a solution if everyone has a different idea of what the actual problem is. When you've done the work to define the problem clearly, you can bring everyone onto the same page, which means you can coordinate efforts more effectively. This step also builds credibility. People trust leaders who take the time to understand before they act. They can tell when someone has done their homework versus when they're just guessing. That trust becomes a powerful asset, not just in solving this problem, but in building stronger relationships and teams for the future. Sometimes understanding a problem requires gathering data and looking at it objectively. That could mean tracking numbers, reviewing past performance, or analyzing trends. Data doesn't have emotions. It just tells the story of what's actually happening. And while numbers alone can't always give you the full picture, they can confirm or challenge your assumption in ways that lead you to a clear understanding. Patience is key here. In a world that rewards speed and instant results, slowing down to fully grasp a situation can feel unnatural. But rushing is how mistakes happen, and it's how you end up solving the wrong problem. Taking time to dig deeper might delay action for a little while, but it increases the chances that when you do act, you'll hit the mark. Of course, you don't want to get stuck in analysis paralysis, where you spend so much time studying the problem that you never actually move toward a solution. The goal isn't to understand every single detail before you act. It's to understand enough to take an informed first step. You can always gather more information as you go, adjusting your approach based on what you learn. The bottom line is this: understanding the problem is about clarity, and clarity is power. It transforms the way you see the situation. Instead of feeling like you're trapped in a maze, you start to see the layout. You notice the dead ends, but you also spot the paths that lead out. And once you see those paths, you can start walking toward them with confidence, knowing you're not just guessing, you're moving with purpose. When you take the time to fully understand a problem, you're not just solving something in a moment. You're building a skill you can use for the rest of your life. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice looking deeper, asking better questions, and finding the truth behind the surface. And the more you do that, the less intimidating problems become. Because you know that before you try to fix it, you'll know exactly what you're fixing. When you're facing a problem, it's easy to get tunnel vision and think you have to handle it all by yourself. That mindset is dangerous because it limits the range of solutions you can see and the speed at which you can act. The truth is, no matter how smart, talented, or capable you are, there are always people who can add value to your process. People who have been through something similar, who can see things from a different angle, or who have resources you don't. Seeking input and collaboration isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. It means you're focused on getting the best result, not just being the person who came up with it. The first thing to understand about collaboration is that it doesn't just mean asking anyone and everyone for advice. You have to be intentional about who you involve. If you're dealing with a business challenge, seek out people who understand the industry, the numbers, or the customers. If it's a personal problem, talk to people you trust to be honest with you, not just tell you what you want to hear. The value of collaboration comes from quality, not quantity. 10 shallow opinions aren't worth one deeply informed perspective. When you bring the right people into the conversation, you expand your field of vision. Problems can look different depending on your position, and sometimes you're too close to see the full picture. Someone standing at a different angle might point out something you've completely overlooked. That's why collaboration is so powerful. It's like turning on extra lights in a dark room. The more lights you have, the fewer blind spots there are. It's also important to understand that collaboration doesn't mean you give up control of the decision-making process. You're still responsible for the final call. But the insights, feedback, and experiences of others can sharpen your thinking and help you avoid mistakes you might not have spotted on your own. Think of it like a chef tasting their dish before serving it. They might have the recipe in their head, but a second opinion could be the difference between a good and exceptional. One of the best things about seeking input is that it can save you from reinventing the wheel. Someone else has probably faced a similar challenge before, and they may already have a proven approach to solving it. By learning from their experience, you can skip unnecessary trial and error and move faster toward a real solution. This doesn't mean you copy everything they did. It means you adapt what works for your situation. Collaboration also adds accountability. When you work alone, it's easy to procrastinate or get lost in overthinking. But when you involve others, you create a kind of shared commitment to progress. You're not just solving the problem for yourself anymore. You're now part of a team effort, and that shared responsibility can push you to follow through more consistently. The process of seeking input also forces you to articulate the problem clearly, and that alone can lead to breakthroughs. When you have to explain the situation to someone else, you're forced to organize your thoughts, strip away vague language, and get specific. In doing so, you might uncover details or patterns you hadn't noticed before. Sometimes the act of explaining the problem out loud reveals the solution before the other person even says a word. Of course, collaboration works best when it's done with humility. You have to be open to hearing ideas you might not like, and you have to resist the urge to defend your position too quickly. If you go into a conversation just to prove you're right, you're not collaborating, you're debating. True collaboration means you're willing to be wrong, to change your mind, and to let better ideas rise to the top, even if they don't come from you. There's also an emotional benefit to seeking input. Problems can feel isolating, especially when they're heavy or complicated. Bringing others into the process reminds you that you're not alone, and that alone can reduce stress and help you think more clearly. Sometimes you don't even need a full-blown solution from the other person. You just need their encouragement or perspective to give you the energy to keep going. But collaboration is a two-way street. If you want others to help you when you're facing a problem, you have to be the kind of person who helps others when they're facing theirs. Building strong, reciprocal relationships means you'll have a network of people who are willing to step in when you need them. And that network isn't built in a single crisis. It's built over time through consistent generosity and mutual respect. Another thing to remember is that collaboration doesn't always have to be direct. Sometimes seeking input means reading books, studying case studies, or listening to interviews from people who have dealt with similar challenges. You don't have to know someone personally to learn from their wisdom. The point is to expand your pool of insights beyond just your own mind. You should also be aware that not every piece of input will be useful, and that's okay. Part of your role in collaboration is filtering out what doesn't fit your situation. Just because someone offers advice doesn't mean you have to take it. The goal is to gather a wide range of perspectives, then use your judgment to piece together the best path forward. Sometimes the most valuable input comes from people who aren't experts at all. Experts can be great, but they can also be trapped in conventional thinking. Someone outside the field might bring a fresh, unconventional approach you never would have considered. This is why diversity and collaboration matters. Diversity of experience, background, and thought process creates more creative, well-rounded solutions. Collaboration can also make solutions stronger because it exposes them to testing before they're implemented. When you share an idea with others, they can point out weaknesses or potential consequences you didn't see. This allows you to refine and strengthen the plan before putting it into action, which can save you from costly mistakes down the road. One trap to avoid is surrounding yourself only with people who agree with you. It feels comfortable, but it's not helpful. The best collaborators are those who challenge your thinking in a constructive way, who will tell you the truth even when it's not what you want to hear. That kind of feedback can sting in a moment, but it's far more valuable than blind agreements. Finally, remember that collaboration is not just about finding the answer. It's about building something better than you could have built alone. When you invite other people into the process, you're not just solving the problem in front of you. You're building relationships, expanding your thinking, and creating a habit of openness that will make you more effective in every challenge you face. When you work alone, you're limited by your own perspective, your own experience, and your own creativity. When you collaborate, you tap into the collective intelligence of everyone involved. You're multiplying your resources, your ideas, and your ability to act. That's why the most successful leaders, innovators, and problem solvers all have one thing in common. They know when to bring others in. They understand that the strength of the solution often depends on the strength of the team that created it. So when you're stuck, don't just sit there spinning your wheels in isolation. Seek out voices you trust, perspectives you haven't considered, and experiences you can learn from. Let collaboration expand your vision, strengthen your ideas, and move you closer to the solution faster than you could ever get there alone. Because at the end of the day, it's not about proving you can solve everything by yourself. It's about actually solving it and solving it well. Do you want me to move directly into the keynote expansion so your full speech series is complete? Taking action quickly and decisively is often the difference between a problem that gets solved and one that spirals out of control. You can plan all you want, gather the best advice, and study every angle of the issue, but at some point you have to make a move. Too many people get stuck in the thinking mode for so long that they miss their window of opportunity. The longer you wait, the more complicated the problem becomes, the more options disappear, and the harder it is to get back on track. Problems don't just sit there quietly waiting for you. They grow, shift, and sometimes become even more difficult to handle. That's why action matters. Taking action doesn't mean rushing blindly into something without thought. It means moving forward once you have enough clarity to make an informed decision. It's about finding that balance between preparation and execution. Some people lean so far toward preparation that they never actually get started, while others jump in without thinking and make the situation worse. The goal is to reach a point where you understand the core of the problem. You weigh your key options, and then you commit to a direction and start moving. One of the biggest fears that holds people back from taking action is the fear of making a mistake. But here's the truth. You will make mistakes. Everyone does. The difference between successful problem solvers and those who stay stuck is that successful people see mistakes as part of the process, not the end of it. They act, learn, adjust, and keep going. You can't steer a parked car. Once you start moving, even if your first move isn't perfect, you can correct your course along the way. But if you sit still, waiting for the perfect moment, you'll be waiting forever. Another reason people hesitate to take action is the hope that the problem will just go away on its own. While some issues do resolve themselves with time, most of the important ones don't. In fact, avoidance usually makes them worse. The longer you delay, the more entrenched the problem becomes, and the more drastic your eventual solution will have to be. Quick, decisive action keeps the problem from gaining too much momentum. There's also a psychological benefit to taking action. It builds confidence and reduces stress. When you're stuck in indecision, your mind runs in circles, replaying the problem over. That mental loop drains your energy and makes the problem feel even bigger than it is. And the moment you take a step forward, even a small one, you break that loop. You shift from being a passive victim of the situation to being an active participant in solving it. That change in mindset can make a huge difference in how capable and motivated you feel. Taking action quickly doesn't mean acting recklessly. It means acting with urgency. Urgency is about recognizing that time matters and treating the situation with the seriousness it deserves. A lot of people confuse urgency with panic, but they're not the same thing. Panic leads to bad decisions because it's driven by fear. Urgency leads to smart, timely decisions driven by commitment. To act decisively, you need to trust yourself. That trust doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from building a track record of following through. The more you practice making decisions and taking action, the more you'll learn that you can handle the consequences, even when things don't go perfectly. Over time, this creates a kind of internal momentum. You stop freezing up in the face of challenges because you know you can figure things out as you go. Sometimes decisive action means making a bold move that others might not understand right away. People around you might want to debate, delay, or wait for more certainty. If you know the situation demands immediate action, you have to be willing to lead. That might mean taking responsibility for a choice that's unpopular in the moment, but necessary in the long run. Leaders are often the ones who are willing to take that first step when no one else will. Action also creates information. You can only learn so much by thinking about a problem in the abstract. Once you start acting, you see real-world results that give you feedback. Those results tell you whether you're on the right track or whether you need to adjust. In that way, action and learning are part of the same cycle. You take a step, observe what happens, make adjustments, and take another step. The faster you complete that cycle, the faster you move toward a solution. It's important to note that not every action needs to be massive. In fact, when a problem feels overwhelming, the smartest thing you can do is start small. Break the challenge into smaller parts and tackle one at a time. Those small wins build momentum, and before you know it, you've made significant progress. Sometimes a single phone call, a conversation, or a quick decision can start a chain reaction that moves you much further than you expected. There's a saying, do what you can with what you have, where you are. Waiting for the perfect resources, timing, or conditions is a trap. The perfect moment rarely comes, and even if it does, you may not recognize it until it's gone. The best time to start is now, with whatever tools and knowledge you currently have. If you need more, you can gather them along the way. The key is to break the inertia and get moving. Taking action also sends a signal to others, whether it's your team, your family, or the people affected by the problem. That progress happened. That signal matters because it builds trust and motivates others to contribute. People are more likely to support and follow someone who is actively working towards a solution than someone who's stuck in endless discussion. When you act quickly, you also create the possibility of solving the problem before it spreads. Many challenges grow in complexity the longer they're left unaddressed. If you can intervene early, you often save yourself from bigger headaches later. It's like putting out a small flame before it becomes a wildfire. Fast action can prevent a crisis from escalating. Of course, there will be times when you act quickly and things don't go the way you hoped. That's inevitable. The key is to treat those situations as temporary setbacks, not permanent failures. Instead of seeing them as proof you shouldn't have acted, see them as proof that you're engaged in the process of solving the problem. You can't refine a strategy you never test, and you can't test a strategy you never start. Over time, taking action quickly becomes a habit. You stop overthinking every step and start trusting your ability to navigate uncertainty. You understand that most solutions are built through action, adjustment, and persistence, not through endless waiting for the perfect plan. You start to see problems as challenges to engage with, not threats to avoid. The most successful people and organizations in the world share this trait. They move. They don't let fear, doubt, or over-analysis keep them frozen. They gather enough information to make a smart decision, then they act. And if the first action isn't perfect, they adjust and keep moving until they get it right. That's how progress is made, and that's how problems get solved. When you face your next challenge, remember this. Action is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. No amount of thinking or talking will cross that bridge for you. You have to step onto it yourself. The sooner you take that step, the sooner you'll find out what works, what doesn't, and what needs to change. And every step, no matter how small, moves you closer to the solution. So don't wait for permission, don't wait for perfect conditions, and don't wait for the fear to go away. Take action now. You can think, adjust, improve along the way, but the most important thing is to start. Because while hesitation keeps you stuck in the problem, decisive action moves you toward solution.